Welcome to Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana basketball news and discussion, brought to you by the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Join me live at assemblycall.com every Thursday night and immediately following every IU game for our live IU postgame show. And visit InsideTheHall.com for complete coverage of IU basketball and to join the discussion in the Inside the Hall Premium Forum.
IU football season is right around the corner. Led by head coach Tom Allen, the Hoosiers kick off the regular season on August 31st against the Ball State Cardinals at Lucas Oil Stadium before hosting Eastern Illinois on September the 7th in the home opener at Memorial Stadium. Visit IUHoosiers.com or text 812-855-4006 for more IU ticketing information. Go IU!
On this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink, it's a two-parter. In our first part, it's me and Alex Bozich. We just kind of catch up. Alex and I haven't talked, at least on the podcast, since Trey, Galloway and Anthony Leal announced their commitments to Indiana. So we give our assessment of those commitments, just talk about some other offseason issues, the rest of the 2020 recruiting board, and some whispers that we're kind of hearing about the team during the offseason. So we get all caught up on the IU basketball stuff there. And then in part number two, really excited to be joined by Steve Aird, the new IU volleyball coach, new that he's entering his second season, was there last year. Obviously, Indiana getting ready to open up Wilkinson Hall, the new volleyball arena this season. So we talked with him about that, about the volleyball program, about the commitment of Evan Fitzner's sister, who was one of the best recruits to ever commit to Indiana University. And we also talked with him about his love for the Toronto Raptors and OG Anunoby. So, and did not realize how many IU basketball connections there are on the current volleyball roster. So really fun conversation. Really appreciate Coach Aird taking the time to talk with us. So that comes in part two of this week's edition. Before we get to all of that, a quick word from this week's sponsor, SeatGeek. Do you ever feel like ticketing websites make getting to the event difficult on purpose? It's almost like they're so big they feel like they can get away with not caring about the customer experience. So what if their site's annoying and doesn't have the events you want? Hello, status quo. The real question is, how easy could it be if those ticketing sites actually cared? Well, SeatGeek cares. Why are they better than the rest? A quick look at the App Store shows over 50,000 five-star reviews. How's that for customer satisfaction? And the reason why customers are satisfied is because SeatGeek delivers a better process. They pull together millions of tickets from all over the web. They rate each deal on a scale of 1 to 10, and they display them on an interactive seat map. Green dots mean good deals, red dots are overpriced. It's all right there in a glance, in an instant, and every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets with confidence. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone. It's by far the fastest and easiest way to find tickets. My wife and I are currently debating whether we want to take our 3-year-old daughter to her first concert, sit out on the lawn. We don't want her to be too close because we don't want to mess up her hearing, but think about taking her to a concert. We kind of feel like that would be a fun event. If you've ever taken a toddler or 3-year-old to a concert, let me know whether it's a good or bad idea. We're not quite sure, but I can tell you this. If we do decide to go and we decide to buy tickets, SeatGeek is where we will buy our tickets. And here's the thing. SeatGeek will give you $10 off your first purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. Download the SeatGeek app. Use the promo code BRINK for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K, for $10 off your first purchase. All right, here now is my conversation with Alex Bozich, and then stick around after that for our conversation with Steve Aird. All right, Alex, fun show this week. We are going to be talking with Steve Aird, IU volleyball coach, here in about 30 minutes. Before we do that, though, I wanted to just kind of take an opportunity to catch up with you. We haven't had a chance to talk about IU in a few weeks and some of the recent developments. Did we do a podcast after Trey committed?
Trying to think. I don't think so because that was
we didn't because you were gone. That's right.
We had pre-recorded the episode with Jordan Sperber and Rand. So
that's right. Okay, so we have not talked, at least an episode of Podcast on the Brink, since Trey committed, since Anthony Leal committed. Let's talk about those two guys. Just kind of to start, give me your general impression of those commitments. What they mean for the future of Indiana basketball and what they mean for kind of this offseason, which really didn't have a whole lot of momentum and now feels like it's got a little momentum going.
Yeah, it's funny you ask that question specifically because I was just talking to somebody about this last night. They were asking me how I was feeling about the upcoming season and what kind of team IU would have. And I don't know if it was just the the good news or the fact that the season's drawing closer, but those two commitments for some reason had me a little bit more optimistic about the future of the program. In that, it felt like all offseason it was basically just, I don't want to say bad news after bad news, but there was just nothing really happening that was a positive for the program. And so getting those two guys, I think, to commit early on was pivotal, because now they've got a solid foundation for this recruiting class, and they can go ahead and start to, focus on 1, 2, or 3 more names to fill out the rest of the class. And in terms of both players specifically, I like them both. I wondered if IU would take both, and I kind of thought that they would, because I think they're different in many ways, but they can complement each other pretty well. I think they can play together on the court at the same time. We'll start with Galloway. The thing that impresses me most about him is just his aggressiveness and his basketball IQ, how he carries himself on the floor. You can tell he's been really well coached. I mean, a lot of the Indiana elite kids are really well coached, but I think for him it goes a step beyond that, in that his dad's obviously been very hands-on with him. His high school coach knows the game very well, is pretty focused on fundamental development. And while Trey's jump shot right now from the perimeter is not the best, I think the rest of his game is pretty complete. He's above average in my mind ball handler. He's aggressive taking the ball to the rim. If you've watched any of the videos that I've posted over the past couple of months, this is a guy that can finish above the rim in traffic. I mean, there's a couple instances, if you go back and watch the highlights, where he's going at people and dunking on them, which I don't think is something he was doing a couple of years ago. So he's definitely going to be a guy that can make an impact from that standpoint. He does have to improve the shooting, but I think that will come. And Anthony Leal, his strength, and people have asked me, how good of a shooter is he? I don't. While I wouldn't put him in that category of Jordan Holes, Nick Zeisloft, Matt Roth knockdown shooter, I think he's above average. I think he's better than what Indiana has had these last couple of seasons. And if you put him on the court with other guys who can make shots as well, and have him be able to space the floor, I think he can make an impact. He's a guy who's admitted he's going to have to get more athletic, quicker, work on his strength, but got a really good frame. I think 6'5", right around there. I think both of these guys, while they may not be players that come in immediately and make a huge impact in terms of their statistics, they may take a couple of years to kind of get used to the game and get acclimated. I think by the time they're juniors and seniors, they're rotation pieces that can help you win a lot of games. And that's what we've talked about a lot, right, Jerod? I mean, having guys who kind of grow within your program over a 4-year career. Maybe as freshmen they come in and have their occasional moment, but by the time they're juniors and seniors, whether they're starting or whether they're the 6th or 7th man, I think both of these guys are going to be important contributors and can really help the program win games. Not dissimilar to Armand Franklin.
I don't like saying this, but they are the kinds of guys that Purdue's been kicking our butt with since 2014. In-state players that, they're not McDonald's All-Americans, they're not 5-star guys. They maybe weren't even like obvious offers at first, but Archie Miller watched him, built a relationship with him, clearly has a vision for how to use him. And you're right, they're going to be 4-year players that maybe don't step in right off the bat, but really develop in the program and help give Indiana basketball an identity and a culture. And that's what has been missing. And, it's funny, actually, I went back today because I kind of had that thought about how, they remind me of these guys that Purdue's had. And you go back through actually and look at some of the recruiting rankings of some of the guys that Purdue's had that, that have been really good. Guys like, Dakota Mathias and Ryan Klein and, these other types of guys. And they were all ranked below where Trey and Anthony are ranked as prospects. And so that's the thing. To me, I think there are a really nice balance of, that, again, the basketball IQ, they're probably going to be there for 4 years. But they can also do some things on a basketball court, And so I think it can be easy at times when you look at them to kind of underplay that. But I thought you really did a nice job of talking about their strengths. And, the more that I've gotten to know them as players, just, watching highlights and things of that nature, I've become more and more excited about, about their future as Hoosiers. And it's funny that you mentioned, I mean, it makes no sense, but that them committing actually shaded your view a little bit of how next year's team would be. They're not going to be here next year, but it's just like kind of just the feeling, because there hadn't been any real good news, and then it's like, oh yeah, okay, things are happening again. It's funny how that works.
Right, feel better about
yeah.
the future. Another guy who kind of comes to mind, I know I've mentioned in previous podcasts a lot about Ryan Klein, Dakota Mathias. Another guy that just kind of popped into my head when you were talking was Matt McQuaid, who just played at Michigan State.
Yeah,
kind of that gritty glue type guy that can make perimeter shots, that can help you win games.
They're going to miss him a lot this year.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So I guess the question now is what's next for 2020? Because here's the thing, like we just talked about how much Trey and Anthony and guys like Armand Franklin are going to bring to the program. Compared them to some Purdue guys, but Purdue has also had a guy, and I don't want to, take this comparison too long, but they got, a 5-star guy in a Caleb Swanigan, a guy like Carson Edwards, who was, ranked 120th in the nation, but ended up really being a superstar type player. So to really succeed at the highest level, you obviously have to have guys who fit a system that build a culture, but you've also got to have some star power as well. And I think what guys like Trey and Anthony and Armand project as is, guys who are really going to know their roles, are going to grow, may not be all conference players, although I wouldn't put it past any of those guys, but they might not necessarily project as that. So you're also going to have to add more Romeos, more Trace Jackson Davises, more, even guys with the recruiting pedigree of a Jerome Hunter. And it seems like a lot of the names now at the top of the 2020 list are guys like that, Dawson Garcia and Caleb Love and some of these other guys. How do you see Indiana's chances stacking up on some of those higher-ranked players in the class of 2020 to fill in around Trey and Anthony?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just redid the 2020 recruiting board this week. If you haven't checked it out, it's on the site, a couple posts down from the top. But I would, I have Matt Cross at the top in terms of the guys who are still available, and I'm going to keep him there. Yeah, he's not
But he's where, like 75th? So yeah, he's in the Jerome Hunter range, kind of.
Right. I mean, a little bit less. I think Hunter was more around 50, but I don't necessarily know that Indiana's going to get that 5-star type player in this class. I mean, Caleb Love is the guy that's been talked about a lot, but most of the experts I've seen discussing him have him favoring North Carolina. I know that Indiana's in his final 6, but that's kind of my whole thing with this class is I think they needed to get not necessarily a superstar, but they need to get foundation guys who are going to, help build the kind of the foundation for the program over the next several years. Now, Trace, I think the good thing about Trace is he's that 5-star type player, but he's not going to be, in my opinion, a 1 or 2 and done. So he sticks around for a couple of years and can be a guy who by his junior year is going to be really good. I think the next time where you might see Indiana load up on a McDonald's All-American type player would be the 2021 class with Christian Lander being in state. So I think with this class, if they can close it out with, getting a guy like Cross or getting a guy like, Garcia's in that top 40. He's a fringe 5-star. That would be a great pickup. But even if they're only able to get somebody like Cross and then maybe add somebody that can shoot like an RJ Davis or handle the ball, I think that, I think ultimately they need to at least get 4 recruits in this class. I don't necessarily think there's a specific position of need. I think it would be good to get, a big man if they can get one, but you also have to remember next year they'll still have Joey Brunk and Trace Jackson Davis, so that's still a pretty good foundation for the front court. And then the other guy I think to keep an eye on is Jordan Geronimo, who is making an official visit later this month, and he's not even in the rankings right now, but it sounds like when he's, when it's all said and done, he could be. He looks like a guy that's kind of rising up the radar. And I saw one thing where he was kind of compared to an OG and an Obi, so that wouldn't be in terms of kind of his ascent, So that wouldn't be I don't think a bad type of player to have around either. So ultimately, you got a good start with these 2 guys, and then if you can just get 2 more, I think. Regardless of whether it's Cross, guy like RJ Davis, Dawson Garcia, I think you're having a pretty good year recruiting wise.
Yeah, Cross would be great. Hopefully, Indiana's able to land him, and I think we've all heard how much Archie has prioritized him. So that would really be a big get, obviously, for Archie. By the way, Jordan Geronimo, that's just a phenomenal basketball name. Man,
I know.
I just want him to come here so I can say his name for 2 or 3
Can you
years.
imagine Bill Raftery saying Geronimo as he comes down the lane in his best voice? I mean, or Gus Johnson.
Schedule. I think we're just waiting on the Big Ten schedule, right? Is that why all the Big Ten teams are waiting to announce the final schedules?
Well, a lot of Big Ten teams have already announced their non-conference schedules. Quite a few.
So when do we expect Indiana to announce theirs?
Indiana typically announces their non-conference schedule when they have the full Big Ten schedule.
Yeah.
But a lot of Big Ten schools have already thrown out their non-conference schedule. So I've been a little bit surprised.
That's what I meant is the full schedule.
Yeah, but last year I think it was about August 21st. So we may be a week or two from that. But it's always nice to have some dates and just kind of see how the schedule's going to shape up. The thing I'm most interested in seeing is those early December games. I think those really are. A couple of years ago, we talked, is this going to be a good thing? And now it's like, I really like this. I wish they would kind of, have more games earlier in the season, because you kind of get into that rut sometimes after the Big Ten ACC challenge of, well, you got the Crossroads Classic and maybe you have one other good game, but then there's, 2 or 3 games where, the students aren't home. And although it's a great opportunity for people who may not otherwise get to see a game to come to Assembly Hall, it's some of those scores, you're yawning by halftime. And especially if it's like an 8 or 9 p.m. tip, you're like, why are we doing this at this time of day? And so to have those early Big Ten games, I think is a great thing. Just not only for IU, but for the Big Ten to get on that national stage as early as possible and just kind of have people talking about college basketball. Jerod, we've talked a lot over the years of, it's not a problem for us or our audience, but, around the country, how many fan bases or how many areas of the country are really concentrated on college basketball until March Madness. And I think these early season events and the earlier you can start conference play, I think the more interest you're going to get in the sport and ultimately help the sport in the long run.
I agree. So, we're in that part of the offseason now where every now and then you kind of hear some offseason whispers about how certain guys are doing in workouts and, this, that, and the other. I'm curious if you're hearing any interesting whispers that are worth passing along. The one that I will pass along has really gotten me kind of excited is about Darren Davis. And there was a picture that circulated on Twitter of Darren when he was back home in Overland Park in Colorado. And he looked noticeably svelte. And maybe it was you that I mentioned that to. I was like, man, that's as thin as I've seen him look. And then I actually had someone who lives in Aurora. I think Overland Park was his high school, right? And he lived in the town of Aurora, I believe. So who lived in Aurora that emailed me and said that he saw Darren and he looked like really skinny, which, look, maybe is nothing, probably is nothing. It's kind of stuff that we fill extra time with in a podcast in August. But I kind of feel like it might be something, because for a guy for whom conditioning has been such a big issue, and, for whom we've seen injuries that might have been caused and or exacerbated by, just kind of being out of shape, I think that's a really good sign, that he's approaching his final offseason with the right mindset. And if we get, an in-shape, healthy Darren Davis, we've seen the flashes from that guy. Like, no one wonders why he was ranked so highly as a recruit, because we all see it. Like, sometimes you see him just dominate basketball games. And not just on the offensive end. Like, he's a smart, instinctive defender, too. He just doesn't move that well. But he's a pretty good defensive player, too. And if we can get that from him and he can give 15, 20 good minutes every game, be huge for this team, which, is probably going to have to zig a little bit while others zag and really kind of dominate teams down low. But I was really encouraged by that. Hopefully it, means something once the season comes, but that's one whisper that, has me feeling a little more optimistic.
Yeah, 2 things I've seen that have kind of caught my eye this offseason. One was Joey Brunk kind of winning the offseason weight room champ. I think that's significant. I don't, we'll forget about that once the season tips off, but a lot of people, maybe don't don't realize how much work goes into the off-season program for these guys. They're in summer school all summer, and then they're also doing these programs. And I think it's impressive that Joey Brunk has come in and just kind of made his mark. And to me, that shows some leadership on his part. And never really doubted that he was going to be that type of guy in the locker room, or just from talking to him, he's just a really mature guy. In a lot of ways, kind of reminds me of how Max Bielfeldt carried himself when he came into the program. So that impressed me. And then the other thing. And Jerod, you're gonna like this. The Devontae Green video.
Yes.
Of him playing pickup. And this time of year, this is really what we're breaking down. We're breaking down film of a minute of Twitter video of Devontae Green playing pickup. But he looked like he was. Now, it may have been carefully edited, but it looked to me. It looked like he did not.
I didn't see any missed shots.
I think he's due for about a 50% 3-point field goal percentage, and this is. I'm as the offseason goes on, I'm slowly moving to the front of the train with you on the Devontae Green breakout senior season. I'm trying to think. I was trying to think the other day. We're going to start putting together. Dylan Burkhart and I, the UM Hoops Inside the Hall annual top 25 Big Ten players list. And I was thinking to myself, it's maybe the first year that I don't know if there's going to be an IU player in the top 25, but if there was an IU player in the top 25, who would it be? And Devontae's potentially the guy I think that would make the most sense. But other than that, it's going to be hard for me to really make a great argument for an IU player to be included on the list. But I think he's got a chance, if we're going to look at the potential and the role he's going to have on the team, I think he's got a chance to be included. Or maybe a Rob Finney.
Rob Finney. I would say you might be underselling Rob Finney just a tad because of what he does on both ends. And if you think back to how he was playing before the injury, I mean, he was kind of playing at that level already. I mean, just the shooting numbers, his scoring was ticking up. His assist numbers are really good. And you think back to some of the defensive performances he had last year, like what he did against Cassius Winston in that home victory. To me, I think Rob would be the first guy. Devontae is he's such an interesting player, and trying to project him for this season is so interesting because, it's not like we didn't see it from him for an extended period last year. Like what he did at the end of the season last year was really impressive. And it was 7 games. I mean, that's, 22% of the season. I mean, it was an extended time period. And it really seemed like a switch had kind of flipped. And it wasn't just offense either. I thought his defense was a lot better. He was more engaged defensively. It kind of seemed like he got back to being the guy who, when he was a recruit, said he wanted to come in and be one of the best defensive players in the country. I remember when we did his scouting report back when he committed on the assembly call. That was one of the things we talked about. And we've seen some defensive spurts from him, but never really the consistency. And I actually think the defensive ability of Indiana's guards is, if you're trying to paint the picture for why Indiana's underrated and can be better this season than what people think, it's easy to kind of look at the points returning and the shooting percentages and all that and be a little skeptical, and that's fine. I think Indiana's got a chance to be really good defensively at the guard position, mainly because of Rob and Devontae. So, yeah, I think those are the two guys that you would look at, mainly because the big guys, no one has, just like that clear path to 25, 30 minutes where you feel like they'll rack up the numbers. The other point I want to make, going back to what I talked about with Duran and what you talked about with Joey Brunk, I think what they're doing this offseason bodes really well for how they will perform this season. I also think it's great for Trace Jackson Davis's development as a freshman to come in, because when you're a freshman, you only know what you see. And he, is seeing a guy like Joey Brunk that he's close with, that he's played with, just kind of going out there busting his butt. That's what he's going to think you do as a college player. And I think that's great for him to see as a young guy. That's how culture gets passed on from one season to the next, and so that to me is just, kind of one of those underrated things that is a big benefit from seeing those guys take it so seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned IU needing to be good. They should be good defensively with the guards. They need to be good defensively with the guards, because if they're not, we'll get into this, as the months ahead as we get closer to the season. But one of my biggest concerns with this team is, where's the offense going to come from? Well, I think that's going to be something that has to be worked out over the course of the season. But the defense, I think if this team's going to be successful in the non-conference part of the schedule, the defense has to be pretty much ready to perform from day one. And if it's not, I think, I put IU. I think I did my updated Big Ten power rankings today. I put them 8th. I think if they're going to finish in the top half of the league, they have to pick up right where they left off last year defensively and build on the offenses and improve the shooting as the year goes along. But the foundation definitely has to be the defense.
Absolutely. Anything else that we haven't discussed? The assistant coach, we're still waiting on that. I don't think either one of us has much insight on that. The Victor Oladipo fantasy camp experience, I believe, is coming up next weekend. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Are you going?
No, I was thinking about going. I wanted to go. The timing didn't really work out. It would have been really fun to go. But I look forward. I know at least one person who's going, and I'm looking forward to hearing how it is and seeing what kind of insight they get from that experience.
I wonder if that person would come on the podcast and talk about it.
Probably.
That'd be a fun episode.
It would be a fun episode.
So keep that in the back of your mind as we navigate our way into the I guess are we officially in the dog days of summer here? Or are we past?
I feel like we're past it now because we got a couple of commitments. Like it felt like the dog days of the summer from an IU basketball, perspective were really July. Where it's just like you're waiting for something good to happen, nothing good is happening. Now we've got a couple of commitments. I feel like we're rolling a little bit.
Yeah,
more stuff to talk about.
Season won't officially be here until we have Crispin on, but that's when I know the season's close, when we have the optimism from John on all 14 Big Ten teams leading into the next season. We'll look forward to that. But yeah, this has been an interesting offseason, but I agree with you in many ways. Getting those 2 commitments when they did, if Indiana still didn't have a commitment and we were doing this podcast right now, I think our tone and our just kind of what we were saying about the program, I think would be a lot different if they didn't have those 2 guys. So
we would have talked for like 3 minutes, and there would have been 26 minutes of awkward silence while we waited for Steve to get here.
Exactly.
There wouldn't have been anything else to say.
For sure.
Okay, let's wrap here. And coming up next, we talk with Steve Aird, IU Volleyball Coach. It'll be fun. Stick with us. And we are joined now by Steve Aird, head volleyball coach of the Indiana Hoosiers. Coach Aird, welcome to Podcast on the Brink. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, guys. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you. So I can't even imagine how excited you must be feeling right now with Wilkinson Hall set to open in, a couple weeks, if I believe I just read. Is that correct?
Yeah, our first real match will be August 30th. We've got 4 matches that first weekend, so 2 on the Friday, 2 on the Saturday, but thrilled. It's a spectacular venue. I could hit a pitching wedge to Assembly Hall from here, and being on campus, being part of everything that's going on has been really, really cool. So the girls are excited. I think our staff's excited. I think the community in Bloomington and volleyball fans in the state are pretty excited. It's going to be a fun weekend.
And how long does the season go? So you guys start the end of August, and then how long, when's the tournament?
So the tournament starts basically Thanksgiving weekend. We play our final Big Ten matches, and then the selection show is that Sunday after the matches go down. Selection show is identical to men's hoops, so it's 64 teams with the automatic qualifiers and then the at-large bids. And then if you win the whole darn thing, it's usually middle of December is the national championship, and that's the way it works.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I try to come up for a basketball game. It's usually sometime in February or March, but I really want to get to Wilkinson Hall and see a game, so I may need to push that up a little bit. So let me ask you this, because we're talking to a basketball audience, but a lot of people who love supporting the Hoosiers, and probably a lot of great volleyball fans. But for someone like me who has never really been to a college volleyball game, how would you coach me on being a good fan for the Hoosiers? Because I would want to go there, obviously cheering, but what makes kind of a knowledgeable volleyball fan? What tips could you give someone like me?
Well, the one thing that's very much the culture of the sport is it's a participation event as a fan. So, much like the NBA, we've got music going on almost all the time. Anytime we score a point or get a big block or a big kill or do something positive. I mean, the announcer just kind of screams point IU, and if our girls are jumping around like good things are happening, feel free to cheer. There's a lot of cool nuance to it as you spend more time. I mean, when the other team's about to serve, and kind of like the best analogy I could give you is the free throw for the opponent, where the guy's at the line and he's bounced it a couple times and the student section's going crazy. The same thing happens for us when the other team's about to serve. The you can't do that chance, the stomping before someone sits down on the bench. There's a lot of carryover, but basically volleyball, especially volleyball for the way we're going to run this program, is kind of just a huge party that just happens to have a volleyball match going on at the same time.
Steve, the Big Ten is known as one of the premier, if not the premier, volleyball conferences in the country. The challenge ahead of you to build Indiana to what you want it to be, what's your plan? What's your vision for this program? I know I believe this is going to be your second season in Bloomington, right. But the new facilities obviously got to help. But kind of what are kind of in your mind the things that need to happen for this program to progress over the next couple of years to where you're in the conversation with those top programs right now in the Big Ten?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think something I spent a lot of time thinking about before I took the job. I mean, the realities are really simple. You guys know it's a great school, athletic department and history here, especially for a variety of the Olympic sports. They've been elite and excellent. Volleyball in the state of Indiana is exceptional. I would say it's one of the 3 or 4 best states in the country in terms of prep and high school volleyball, club volleyball. So at the beginning, the first X number of months, it was trying to just create some energy so people could get a sense it might go in a different direction. I inherited a team that was 1-19. So in our first year, going into our first year, it was trying to have a little bit more competitive success. But we recruit really young. We're recruiting 8th grade, 9th grade kids where they're committing and signing as a senior. But the volleyball culture is these kids sign and commit really young. So it was that challenge of you got to bring in some bodies. You've got to just change the culture a little bit. And the team was coming off such a tough year that a lot of the kids that were in the program just didn't feel real good about a whole bunch of stuff. So, I brought in a staff that's high energy and young, very accomplished. I was fortunate to be able to do a decent job at Maryland, taking them from about 180th in the country to, sweeping USC and beating Purdue and having a pretty good year in year 4. And, I've trained Olympians and trained pros and won national championships. So if you're a player, my goal is to try to get you better and help you develop. And, we had a good year. So we were on the bubble for the NCAA tournament last year. We finished over 500 and recruiting has gone crazy. And the building, of course, as you identified, is put us on the map nationally as a destination. And Indiana taking this seriously is really helping us.
You mentioned volleyball being a sport where girls, commit and sign early. One prospect that I know you landed that did not sign early, and you're probably thankful for that, and one that our audience will be very familiar with, at least her brother, Evan Fitzner, played it at Indiana for 1 year last year. But Emily Fitzner, who, based on the research I've done, is, one of the best, if not the best, in terms of national ranking recruits to ever sign with IU Volleyball. How did you get involved? Obviously, the connection with Evan there had to be of help, but how did she become interested in IU volleyball based on you described the program as being 1-19, before the season before you took over, and how big of a commitment and subsequent signing was that for you as you build this program moving forward?
Yeah, the backstory is cool. So when I had taken this job, there were 4 or 5 big jobs in the country. USC was one, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and I had gotten calls for all of them, and just thinking about where I wanted to be. When I made the decision to come to Indiana, because there was such a coaching carousel, and it happens in all the sports and football and hoops, and there were some players that coaches were going in a different direction. So Emily had committed to USC, and the coaching change there had to go in a different direction. So she was kind of back on the market. I had known of her. I had known the club. I've got one of my best friends coaches for the club that's out in San Diego. So I had been recruiting her and known of her well before I knew who Evan was, and certainly knew about her well before either of the Fitzner crew had shown up at Indiana. Ironically, that first year, before Evan, when Evan was on his official visit, I came back with my family. My family and I went on a little vacation, and I came back and sat down with him for 30 minutes over at basketball just to talk to him about why I came here and why I thought it was great. And he had known that I was recruiting his sister, so that was kind of cool. And then he committed, and we thought it could be a good thing or could be a bad thing. You know, do you want to follow in your brother's footsteps, or do you want to do something different? And it was funny. I guess we both got, I think Evan's a great guy, and he's playing pro now. And, I'm sure everyone wished he had a little bit of a better season, but he's a really good kid, and he can play the game. And Emily is, she's one of the highest ranked recruits and prospects in the history of this program, and certainly kind of cool to get that under your belt out of the gate.
Coach, you mentioned something really interesting there where you talked about recruiting. A lot of kids commit early. That seems like it would be tough from a coach's perspective. I mean, how do you project a high school player, both, their physical maturation, their mental and emotional maturation from when they're a freshman, sophomore in high school to when they're coming to college? It seems like that would be ripe for a lot of recruiting mistakes. Do you see that in volleyball, or is that not the case, and why?
Yeah, no. I mean, that happens. I think, if I gave you two guys clipboard and you were at Indianapolis for the Junior Olympics, and I gave you an hour to walk around and go, hey, find me the 3 or 4 best athletes, you could do it. And even though they're young, I think you see how athletic they are and how smooth they are. That the basketball thing is interesting because not only Emily Fitzner's dad played at Stanford and her brother played here, but Sophie Oliphant's dad played here and won a championship. Megan Sloan, who's on our roster, her father played here for Indiana. There's a lot of, you look at the family, you look at how serious the kind of that ecosystem takes it. You think about how serious they are about developing and playing, and the top 9th grade kids and 10th grade kids in the country usually end up being the top kids when they're 11th grade and 12th grade. I think sometimes with guys, they mature a little bit later, and you can find a kid who's a senior in high school who out of nowhere grows 4 or 5 inches and puts on 15 pounds of muscle, and suddenly he's on the list for everyone, all the top schools. On the women's side, though, you can kind of get a pretty good idea of where they're going to be, and it's experience too. You've seen that type of frame, and you've seen that type of system and what club they play for, high school they play for. So, it's a guess. Recruiting in a lot of ways is guessing, but there's a lot of mitigating factors that gives you a pretty good idea that's going to work out.
And you also mentioned, obviously the Big Ten is so good in volleyball, and you mentioned that Indiana is one of the 3 or 4 best states for high school volleyball. Why is that? I mean, we talk a lot about why Indiana is so good for basketball from a high school perspective, just the deep-seated love of basketball in this state, the coaching. What is it from a volleyball perspective that makes Indiana such a fertile ground for players?
I think it's those two things as well. I think there's some of the best high school and club coaches in the country in Indiana. I think the tradition goes back a long ways. I think a lot of the parents of players now were right on the cusp in the 70s and 80s and kind of taken the sport from being a sport that's played by a lot of people. I mean, volleyball is the number one team sport for young women in the country. And you got over 500,000 kids playing club volleyball, and it's the fastest growing female sport in the country. Just the number of people, the sheer volume of people that are in it is impressive. And not only that, like I said, the quality of the coaching in the program. Some of the best clubs, the AAU equivalents in the country are all within an hour and a half of our campus.
What's been the reception when you've gone around the state? You mentioned obviously the tough couple of seasons that IU had before you arrived. What's kind of been the reception from the club coaches and the high school coaches around the state to you and your coaching staff, and kind of what kind of feedback have they given you on the vision that you have for your program? And one thing we talk a lot about with IU basketball, and that Archie Miller's done really well, is kind of locking down the borders of Indiana. I know you can't get every great player; it's just impossible to do. But I mean, do you share a similar approach that you really want to make Indiana and the Midwest your recruiting base for building this program?
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's impressive what Archie's been able to do, and certainly you want to make those kids know that they're wanted. We've got, I'm not allowed to talk about kids who have committed in terms of names, but 2 or 3 of the best kids in the state have committed in 2021. And we're well on our way with some of the younger kids in the state. But the biggest thing that happened was I think the energy of the program, the new building, having some success, being able to recruit at a pretty high level out of the gate has gotten the people who were pulling for Indiana to get reinvested, kind of reinvigorated with it. The response has been amazing, and we've worked. I mean, you guys get it, whether it's basketball or football or volleyball at this level. You got to be out in the community. You got to be in the gym. You got to be building those relationships. So we've been doing that. I hope at a really high level. I think we've had great attendance at camps and clinics. A lot of high school coaches have come through. You know, our gym is always open. We have a lot of coaches that come in and just want to pick our brain and learn some stuff. And we're excited about the future of it in the state. And I'm learning too. My thing with the state is I feel very strongly, whether I'm in the airport or out recruiting, you know, this is the flagship school in the state. There's some great colleges in Indiana, but people in the state are rooting for IU. And if you're a volleyball person in the state, you want IU volleyball to be relevant, and you're pulling for them. And we certainly get that as the sense as we get in a year too.
Coach, yeah, I want to ask you kind of a couple of just coaching philosophy questions. You know, last year the basketball team obviously went through a really difficult time in January and February, losing 12 out of 13. And, you know, from a fan's perspective, you know, you're just looking at that and just, you know, wanting them to get a victory and kind of seeing all the bad things going wrong. Have you ever had a losing streak like that? And if so, how did you deal with it? And, you know, did you, when that was going on, did you see Archie? Did you give Archie any advice, you know, or any words of encouragement as that is going on? Or is that kind of something where you, you know, keep your distance and let coaches just go to work and try and figure their way out of it?
No, it's funny because, yeah, I mean, every coach will go through a season where, you know, some things happen, injuries happen, you know, you think you got a pretty good team and, you know, so you can't control the schedule and someone getting hot during a game. And, you know, the pressure that Archie has and the program has is obviously, you know, it's a different stratosphere than what we're dealing with, but we see them a lot. We see the guys a lot. I get to, interact with them. I think I find myself picking their brain more than vice versa, and especially in terms of understanding how they went through the process when the staff came. And you know, I said in a press conference yesterday that it was. I remember listening to him in going into year two, and just saying in year one there's so many moving parts, and you're trying to learn so much stuff that in year two you finally feel like your feet are underneath you. But continuity matters. And continuity of staff obviously helps, and getting some people in your system and being able to recruit your kind of kid. And some of that's cliche, but it's just the truth. And the one thing I will say that I am impressed with is that when you do go through a tough stretch, you got to be a pro. I mean, you pound the rock every day, you come to work, you work as hard as you can to develop talent. You go through the scouting process of how you're going to attack teams, and you're meticulous about that so the kids know that you haven't lost hope in the process. And you know, and they came out of it on the back end and started playing some really good ball. I thought that showed a lot of character, and that was impressive, and something certainly I think we can all learn from.
You know, when you come in and you're trying to rebuild a program, you know, especially one that, you know, had such a poor season the year before you got here, it's one thing to, you know, to kind of rebuild and try and get those immediate results, but then it's another thing to sustain that. What is your plan long term, you know, not just to, you know, win as many games now and have as good a season as you can with the opening of Wilkinson Hall, but also to make sure that you're building something that really sustains over time?
Yeah, and I think that comes back to recruiting and developing talent. It's no different. You know, the beauty of our sport is if I bring in, you know, our class in 2020, the one that'll come in a year from now, is pretty darn good. And the beauty of women's volleyball is I know that we'll have them for 4 years. So basketball, it seems like every single year you're adding pieces, and you know, with men's basketball, with the transfer portal and how things are working out, you're kind of showing up in August and here's your team, and now we're going to work. We have the luxury of planning in advance, and as long as people are healthy, if you bring in a big-time kid early, you know, like, you know, the Fitzner kid, or you know, I've got a libero from Canada who's a phenomenal player who's going to be a freshman as well. So I know for 4 years the kid who, you know, passes the volleyball and one that sets the volleyball is going to be at IU for the next 4 years. And that's a huge difference. So, you know, a lot of the decisions I made last year were based on long-term plays. Sometimes in basketball and football, they don't get the same amount of time, you know, because people get itchy in year two if you don't have success. But, you know, for us, I've got time to build it the right way. I told Fred that, you know, I was really I wanted to do things the right way. I wanted to take my time and build the culture and make sure we could have sustained success. And so a lot of the decisions we make are based on, 3 to 5 year plan, while still trying to have competitive success at the time, because people want to play at a program that's having success.
So you were born in Toronto, and I read that you are a big Raptors fan, and obviously there's an IU connection there with OG Anunoby being on the team for the last couple of years. What is your scouting report on OG after his first couple of seasons in the NBA?
Well, first of all, he's a great dude. So I've been up to Toronto a couple times to hang out with him, and as a human being, he's an A+. He's been through a lot with his family, and he's a hardworking guy, and then he got hurt. So, obviously we're pulling for him because he's a good human being, and as an IU guy, I like him. But yeah, stretch forward, long, can rebound. I think his 3-point shot has got to be a weapon if he's going to be real in the league, and he's got to keep working on that. But, he can defend. His kind of length and athleticism, I think, is what it's the prototypical kind of 3-4 stretch forward kind of deal. And he's got a good engine. I think the guys on the team in Toronto like having him around. He's fun. There's cool videos with him and Serge Ibaka dancing in cars. And he just seems like the kind of guy you want on the team. So if he stays healthy and gets a little bit better from mid-range to long range and can put up decent numbers, I think he's going to have a pretty cool career.
So getting back to volleyball, Coach, as we look ahead to this season, what is kind of a fair expectation for the volleyball team this year? As I mentioned, you guys went 16-15 last year, 7-13. What kind of expectations do you set for yourself and the team heading into the season?
Well, I'll tell you that we're going to be a lot better than we were a year ago. I think we're way more physical. We brought in some transfer players. I think we're more skilled. I think we have depth. It's night and day from the product we're going to put on the floor from last year. The issue, much like people will realize with football, it's 7 of the top 17 teams in the country in the preseason ranking are from the Big Ten. We've got 5 teams in the top 10. And we're the only sport that'll play back-to-back nights in 2 different cities against top 10 teams. So we open the Big Ten season, we'll play at number 3 Minnesota on a Friday night, and then Saturday night we'll play at number 5 Wisconsin.
Holy smokes.
And it's the schedule. Yeah, it's the equivalent basically of saying, okay, IU men's hoops will play Friday night against Duke, and then Saturday night they'll play at Michigan. And that's basically how it works. We don't have a lot of time to recover. The conference is really, really challenging, and we've got 9 new bodies. So 9 returning players, 9 new bodies, and a lot of moving Lego pieces, so to speak. So, I don't want to be cliche, but it's the truth. I think we're going to be a lot better, whether the record is better or not. That's a lot of that's out of our control, and we're only going to really worry about what we can't control. But everyone who saw us play last year and sees us play this year, I think they'll notice that we look different. We're a lot more physical, a lot more fun to watch, and the level of skill is certainly a lot better.
The Big Ten's known in basketball, at least, for some of its venues, around the league being some of the toughest to play in the country. Is it like that in volleyball? And what are maybe some of the more challenging road environments that you encounter in the Big Ten?
Yeah, it's impressive because you're playing in front of 6,000-8,000 people. Nebraska's got one of the better venues in the country, and it's always sold out, and very, very loud and very fun to play in. Minnesota and Wisconsin are both top 10 teams, and they'll have 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people on top of you. And when you add in you're playing on national TV more and more with ESPN and the Big Ten Network covering stuff, it makes it a challenge. I'm a Penn State. I played at Penn State and I played in Final Fours. The environment there when it's rolling can be fun. And I really do think Wilkinson Hall is going to be just such a unique venue. The student section last year we had was fun. We had 300 or 400 students out, but right behind my office is where the kids line up to go into Assembly Hall for basketball games. So they know where we're at, and we don't need 4,000 or 5,000 students. If we had 500-600 students in one of the end zones, I think it's going to be pretty fun, and we'll do tailgates for them and a lot of interactive stuff during matches. So we're hoping that this turns into one of the more challenging places to play in the country because of the size and the energy and the volume. And I think if you're an IU fan of sports in general, it's going to be well worth your time to come check it out at least once.
Yeah, and obviously for folks who are in Bloomington, the best way to support the program is to get out there to Wilkinson, see a game. For those of us like myself who lives in Dallas and may not be able to get there, what are some of the best ways to keep tabs on the volleyball program? Obviously, following on Twitter. Are a lot of the games on Big Ten Network? Are there other sources of information that are really good for staying up to date on everything?
Yeah, I think obviously on the website, the iuhoosiers.com website, there'll be all the information in terms of when it's on TV. The better the team gets, and I don't know if it's the same in hoops, but the better the team gets, the more opportunities for TV and big-time games. But we were on TV once or twice last year. I think we're on 8 times this year between ESPN and the Big Ten Network. And then most all of the games are streamed for people who are interested in doing that. And there's a variety of different ways to get online and see those things. But, the Big Ten, all the links will be on the website, at the main website that people go to check out all things IU. So that would be my recommendation. And hopefully as we get better, there's more and more opportunity for people to check us out on TV.
And are you on Twitter? Do you do lots of tweeting?
I am. Yeah. I do. I actually like Twitter. The girls are into the Instagram thing more, but I'm a words guy more than I'm a picture guy, So, on Twitter, it's just at Coach Jerod, and I try to keep stuff going out there as much as possible about the team and, stuff that I think about a lot, nuance of different things here and there and some fun stuff. I'm a unique guy in a lot of ways and try to do some unique things. So hopefully it's worth a follow.
Awesome. Well, Coach Steve Jerod, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Fun, learn about the volleyball program, and we wish you guys a lot of luck this season. Having a great opening to Wilkinson Hall.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for crossing over a little bit on this, and we're pulling for you all the time.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. Remember to join me and my co-hosts for more IU basketball talk at assemblycall.com and visit Alex over at insidethehall.com for complete coverage of Indiana basketball. If you want to support Podcast on the Brink, here is the single best way to do it. Tell anyone you know who loves IU hoops about us and suggest that they subscribe. Podcast on the Brink can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else podcasts are available. Tell your social media followers, email your friends, text your family members. For weekly discussion about IU basketball, they need to be subscribed to Podcast on the Brink. We'll talk to you next time. Go Hoosiers.